Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creative Live. Welcome back to Creative Live. I'm your host, Kenna Klosterman, and we are here for another live episode of our podcast, We Are Photographers, where we take you in-depth conversations with our favorite photographers, filmmakers, industry greats, all over the world, from their homes to my home to yours. And so whether you are watching on creativelive.com/TV, where you can click on the join chat icon and start chatting where you are tuning in from, you know, we always love to do those shout outs. Or if you're watching on Creative Live's social media, welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, we love to hear where in the world you are tuning in from. We are a community of creatives globally, and we just love to hear from you. So as those start coming in, I am going to introduce our guest today. His name is Frederick Van Johnson, and he is one of the industry greats who I am thrilled to have on the podcast. Frederick is best known for his podcast, This Week in Photo, the TWiP Network. He is also the host and producer of the podcast Behind the Scene. That's SEEN, which is super clever, for Skylum software. He has been a photographer for decades, a marketing professional. He is one of the people that was part of the early on development of Lightroom, iPhoto. He is just had such a career. He was originally a combat photojournalist and just is an incredible human being who knows more about what's going on in the world of photography than probably anyone. So please help me welcome Frederick Van Johnson. Frederick, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. I'm seriously honored to be here, Kenneth. Thanks for having me on. After that intro, I'm like, man, who's that guy? I want to listen to that. That's not me.
I want to meet that guy.
Yeah, he sounds super interesting.
Well, he is super interesting, and that guy is you. And so, that really is the purpose of this podcast, Frederick, is to, dive into the lives and careers of folks that we see and hear from, but don't always hear those, fun personal stories, whether it's the ups and the downs, the creative wins, the creative losses, as we all have. And what I think is super interesting about you and your career is there's just so many twists and turns and, and adaptation, really, and evolution.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if we can start with sort of what is the most exciting thing that you are working on right now? And then we can dive
Ooh.
back in time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Usually we start at the beginning and go to the end. I like starting.
Tricky.
Current day. So what's going on right now? So like you mentioned, This Week in Photo, the podcast that I host and run, which is a little bit more than a podcast now. Over the years, it's been around for over. I'm gonna show the rings of my tree right now, but over a decade, the podcast has been running, and over the years, it has evolved, like you said, has kind of tacked and kind of, moving towards the same direction, but taking different shifts as technology changes and all that. One of the latest changes and what I'm doing in 2021. It sounds so weird to say that, 2021. In 2021 is we have a membership that a lot of people don't know about, like a private community that, we have photographers that come in and hang out and we just chit chat. We do mixers on Zoom, that kind of thing. We do image critiques. We're doing one right after this, for example. And that is about to evolve and go a little bit bigger with courses and, of course, the community still and events and webinars and all that kind of stuff. So the podcast is branching out from being just a bunch of people that love to listen to photography, the TWiP listeners, and the people that participate in the community, to being a much broader kind of social effort, if you will. So, and it's fun building that. The marketing side of me loves building this kind of stuff and just nerding out on the different tools and platforms that are available and all that. So, it's more narcissistic than it is anything else.
Well, there's a lot of fun things to dive in there, first of all, and community.
Yeah.
Tell me about the importance of community to you, because again, like early on, you started a podcast and like you said, grew into the TWiP network, all these different shows, and just continues to build and build and build. And like I said, evolve into what is coming up this year for you and for the community. So talk to me about community, and talk to me about what you have learned about yourself through community.
Yeah, communities is really, really important. I didn't realize how important community was, and how, community is important, and it's also very difficult to kind of get going and then also maintain as the person running the community. And I'll draw a circle around that, because some of the more important things that I've learned, just to answer the question, are just putting myself in the position of custodian versus the guy that's running it. And I'm sitting up on high and dropping down these nuggets of knowledge. I position myself in the community as me, and I'm just another member of the community who happens to be the custodian of the community. So I'm a peer versus someone who's at the top, dropping down nuggets of knowledge, because I'm not. There are many people in my community that are exponentially smarter than I am, right? So, and I love having their input in the community. I love having other people and people that are just new to the world of photography come in and sort of chat about the whole thing. It's all very exciting to me. So yeah, the learning was humility, and not being, not trying to be, oh, I'm the big celebrity guy. I'm not a celebrity, but the big guy that's running all this stuff. It was more of, you're just one of us. I am in the crowd of people, but I'm the guy that has to kind of, row and make sure the rudder is pointed in the right direction. And I'm the fall guy. So if something goes wrong, people have somebody to blame, right? So,
it's a lot. It's a lot to hold, Frederick. And I've always kind of seen, again, humbly, a sort of a similar role for myself and you, in terms of, and I like to call it a guide. You call it custodian. Like, again, we're a holding space for a community of people to connect and do their things. But like you said, also as a part of that community. And I think that's where that authenticity comes in. And it is like you and I both being able to, bring in other people as guests and get the most out of them, and, the experts, but as well as, doing critiques and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty special role to be in. And
it is.
Kudos to you.
Thank you. I was going to say, and it's very like, it's nuanced in that I don't want the TWiP, as much as, because I've been doing it for 10 years, my name, Frederick Van Johnson, is synonymous in many ways with This Week in Photo, which is not the best thing in the world. I put myself in the position of custodian because I want the feel of the community to not be intrinsically tied to me as some sort of thought leader. I want it to be this group that I've coalesced, like a kid, right? You birth this kid, and now it's grown. Hopefully, it'll take care of you later, right? So I kind of look at it from that perspective, that it's this thing that's going to grow, and hopefully with or without me. If I'm not around, I would like to think that the TWiP community will continue on in perpetuity, and I kind of build it with that mindset in mind, that I'm building something. That's why the custodian thing. I'm building something that is made of granite, right? And it's like Mount Rushmore. It's going to be around long after this iteration of humans is here. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Which again goes back to your playing multiple roles, so many roles behind the scenes that people don't necessarily see. But so talk to me about, entrepreneurship. You have a marketing background. You're still a marketing professional. Like, talk to me about early on and building something entrepreneurial that didn't exist, and maybe some of the moments where you had the like, what am I doing?
You mean like yesterday? No. That's every week.
Right? It continues. No, but
yeah, it does.
Let's take us back to early on.
This stuff is like a sine wave, really. And any job, even corporate America, right? In corporate, it's a sine wave. You have great times, and then like, oh, am I getting laid off? And then great times, and then And it's the same. It's similar, not the same. It's just similar with this stuff. To go way back to the beginning, so the entrepreneurial kind of spark, or the, like I say on my podcast when I talk to photographers, I say, what was your Peter Parker radioactive spider moment, right? And what made you know that you wanted to do this thing called photography? And I can trace mine back, at least for the TWiP side, because like you said, there's multiple tangents. There's photography, there's marketing, there's for the entrepreneurial side of things, my radioactive moment or radioactive spider moment was when I was at Apple. And like you said, I was a senior marketing manager at Apple on the Aperture and iPhoto team. And great job, obviously, amazing company, right? But I remember back then, my office was literally about 3 miles from my home, from my driveway, right? So, and I remember just on a Monday, just like this, I remember on a Monday, it was like 8 o'clock, sitting in traffic on 280, like on my way to One Infinite Loop, the Apple campus. And I just remember sitting in traffic thinking like, this is not fun, man. I just don't feel like going into this Monday stand-up meeting. I don't feel like telling these people what I'm working on. I don't feel like justifying my existence again. I love what I'm working on, but I just had that. I don't feel like dealing with it, right? I want to go in my office and close the door and work on stuff. I don't want to interact with people. I just want to get stuff done, right? So it was that kind of, that annoying, like, prick in the back of my neck, just like, and I remember at the time I was listening to Tim Ferriss on the 4-Hour Work Week, and other similar books. I was listening on Audible, and other similar kind of self-help kind of things. That was my thing, still is. So I was listening to that, and I remember thinking, he said something in there about, even if you're in corporate America, you need to treat every job like a contract. Change your mindset to think of it like your 9-to-5 job as not the end all be all. Think of it as another contract, so that it's an income stream, and then build up multiple income streams. So if one goes away, you can have other ones. And that was like a light bulb moment for me. I was like, yeah, Tim, I need income streams. So that's when I started kind of moving down the road of what kind of income stream would I build? What would it look like? And if I was to do that, how would I apply my Apple marketing experience to something externally? Because you learn a lot there. I mean, it's a pressure cooker, but you learn so much. And I was thinking, how do I apply that stuff to this stuff? So I started building and drawing flowcharts and all that stuff, and that was the moment. Insert montage here, and the next scene is me with the TWiP logo on my chest. So.
Well, I think a lot of people will identify with the statement you made, and me as well, who worked in corporate marketing in the corporate world, and with this statement of, was always trying to justify my existence.
Yeah.
Like,
don't lay me off.
Pause.
Don't lay me off. I'm worth it. Don't lay me off.
But just pause on that statement, needing to justify feeling the need to justify your existence.
Yeah.
And flip that around to, I mean, I guess maybe we still are telling ourselves we need to justify our existence with when you're an entrepreneur too.
Yeah.
But it's a self thing versus an other thing.
Yeah, it's a metal to metal thing, right? Instead of having one boss or a couple of bosses that you have to make sure they think you're worth it, you got hundreds of thousands of people that have to think you're worth it, which means if 100 of them don't think you're worth it, you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay your mortgage or anything like that. You just, you can, I think the one of the things that Tim Ferriss said in that book was the myth of the 9-to-5 or the stability of the 9-to-5 is dangerous, because you and I was in it, right? You get to that whole comfort, and I got the expense report, I got this, I got that, they're paying for my cell phone, I got the laptop, I got this big check that comes in every 2 weeks, you got all that stuff. But then instantly, and this is one of the things that pushed me towards entrepreneurialism, was that instantly all that can be gone. And I saw it every quarter, instantly people that were it was literally people that had tattooed the Apple logo on them, or in other companies, were just kind of intrinsically tied their person to that brand. And then when that brand decides that they don't want you anymore, you're kind of walking in the desert, looking for justification. And I remember when I left Apple, this was Adobe. When I left Adobe, I had this meeting with this very famous photographer whose name I won't mention. I had this meeting with this very famous photographer. We were hanging out in San Francisco having lunch, and I said, "Yeah, I'm no longer at Adobe or whatever." And the tone of the conversation shifted from, "You are no longer a resource." That's what it felt like. It felt like, "Oh, you're not the Apple guy anymore, so you're no longer a resource. What can why am I here?" Right? And I was like, I thought you liked me, not the Apple logo. No, it was the Apple logo and what have you done for me lately, Janet Jackson, right? So, yeah, and that was an epiphany moment.
Isn't that fascinating? Okay, first of all, do people really tattoo the Apple logo on their body?
They did. I don't know about now that Apple is a $1 trillion company and is now the man. Back when they weren't the man, and it was like, yeah, we're the rebel forces fighting against the evil Microsoft, and yeah, I mean, you remember the Macworld Expos at Moscone Center in San Francisco, and people used to line up outside to get in there. You'd see rainbow painted hair and Apple logos tattooed into heads, and it was over the top. I mean, it was cool, and it was cool to work for a company that had that kind of, fanboyism around it, because it was like, I work for the company that these people worship. I must be important, right?
Well, it's and it's an interesting evolution again of how companies change, how brands change, all of that. But I want to go back to again this insight of instability with things that we think are the stable part of our lives, our instability. Like it as I've had this conversation with some other entrepreneurs where it's like we do think that having a stable job is working for somebody else, whereas the true stability lies within believing in yourself and justifying your own existence to yourself. And you mentioned that you were like self-help or whatever, what have you had to do for yourself, or can you give us maybe a story about, again, a moment where you were like with your own entrepreneurial journey of having to, I don't know, just dig deeper inside yourself to be able to keep moving forward?
Yeah. There's so many. One of them, which relates to this community that I mentioned, was about 4 years ago, 4.5, maybe 5 years ago. I've always had this sort of burning thing that I wanted to start a community, not so much because I need these masses of people to interact with. It was more of, I'm doing these podcasts, and I wanted a place for people that were interested in the topic of the podcast to interact with each other and continue the conversation, either with me, with each other, or the host or the guest of the show. So I needed a place for that. And back then, I didn't want to do it on Facebook. I wanted to kind of keep it on the website. So and the website is powered by WordPress. So I use a WordPress community plugin on the site. And long story short was I didn't have the time to devote to community management, because it was just like I installed a community and that's it, right? No, that's not it. So what happened was a community that is unsupervised quickly spins out of control. This one spun out of control to the tune of pornography being uploaded in there, and mild hate speech was showing up in there from time to time. Just little like dirty stuff like that was in there. And I issued a couple of warnings, and I was like, you know what, guys, come on, please self-supervise, because I'm doing all these other things. I don't have time to self-supervise or supervise you. And then I gave them the parent-child, if you do this one more time, I'm taking your toys away. And it happened again, I think maybe just to test me. And literally that minute, I deleted it. I shut it down, no notice. It just went away, just evaporated. And I was like, you know what? I can't do that. Maybe we'll try it again in a couple of years. So fast forward, the platforms and software has changed and matured a lot. And, a lot of things have changed, and it was time to retry it again. This time it stuck. So here we are. So that's a story. That was kind of a false start. And I felt like, maybe this community thing is just not for me. How do these other people do it? Maybe they have staffs, people that run it 24 hours a day, but that ain't me. So maybe we'll try again when you don't have to do that. So yeah, it was interesting. It was a sad time because I turned it off, and it was a bad week for me too, because I was like, man, why can't people just be normal? You gotta put crazy stuff in there for other people to see. But I solved it, and if you want to know, I'll tell you how I solved the issue of the pornography and hate speech issue. It was a very simple fix. If you ask me later, I'll tell you about it.
Well, tell us now.
Oh, easy. Money. And money, not because, I want to buy a Tesla or anything. It's money because money is the great remover of anonymity. So the problem with the first community was it was completely free, therefore anonymous, and people could get in there and just, with reckless abandon, say anything about anybody. They could say, your camera is garbage because this and this, and not have any repercussions for it. As soon as you add a dollar value to the membership, in the case of the TWiP community, when it started, was just $4.97 a month, right? So just a little something to make it so that you're not anonymous. I have your credit card number. Everyone in here knows that everyone else has paid to get in there. So it up-levels the thickness and the smartness of the conversation. I can't tell you, just looking at the first one and just the way the conversations were going and the camaraderie and real life friendships that have been built in the new community. I mean, we've had members that have flown internationally to hang out with each other. I mean, it's a real community versus just some other place where you go to kind of hang out and troll. And the other piece of that, the other reason why it worked was when I was restarting the community, my first thought was Facebook groups, of course. And this was around the Facebook controversy with Cambridge Analytica and the data breaches and all that stuff. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it on there. Plus it's free, and Facebook's terms of service say you cannot charge. So I'm going to be back in that same boat again, but it's going to be worse because I can't control anything. Facebook has control over who sees what. And so I'm going to be back in the same boat, only it's going to be a worse boat. So I looked for alternative solutions, and I found a great one that allowed me to put a membership fee on there, and Bob's your uncle. Everything worked. And to like put a square around it instead of a circle, the iteration of the community as it stands today is, I have not promoted it for the most part. We're going to start promoting it. It's kind of been in a multi-year long beta period. So we only have a couple hundred members in there, and we've been kicking the tires for a long time. So now this next iteration is to not kick the tires and kind of push it out into the ocean and see if it floats. So yeah, it should be fun.
Well, it's yeah, but when you take away the anonymousness, the anonymity of and it really is sort of with anything. Once you pay for something, you find value in it in a different psychological way,
Yep.
and it is a step towards self-selecting, the people who truly want to be there. So
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant.
It's attention, right? It's attention. Yep. And there's something to the phrase "pay attention." Right? When you pay, you pay attention to things that you pay for. That even if it's a buck, people, yep. It pushes it from just free, like, oh, I got a free sample at Costco or something, all the way to, okay, I spent my hard-earned dollar on this. Let me see what I got for my money, and let me behave in there because I am not anonymous anymore, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the key. If that was one tip I'd give future Frederick or past Frederick about, community building, I would say that, put some sort of fee on there, or don't make it anonymous at all. And also nurture more. There's a lot of little
Yeah.
kind of community building things I'm sure you're very familiar with to keep the ball rolling forward.
Yep.
But that's one of the big ones, is to keep the trolls out, because that's the hard thing. If you have trolls and people that are negative in there, it's hard to get beyond that. And I'm inherently not a negative person, but when you get in there and you're like, dude, really? Come on. Really? You had to say that? Was it really necessary? Is your life better because you said that? So, I want my community to be a reflection. Like I said, it's a place where I like to hang out
Yeah.
versus, I'm in there. So don't come in and act a fool in my house. So
Absolutely. And it makes me think about how a lot of, creatives or people with podcasts or what have you have been able to create communities using platforms like, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on some of the platforms where, again, people can subscribe on a monthly basis to interact, and it allows them a way to make money as well, and
yeah,
have an
yeah,
income stream
yeah,
for doing your what you love to do, and
yeah.
have ways for people to do Q&As, and what have you. What is the platform that I'm trying to think of? Oh my gosh, it's
I'm
where
not
people
sure.
like launch not launch new things. You've got supporters. You've got it'll
Facebook?
come
No.
to me. No, no, no. It's where you can people can, ah, this is going to get me. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
It'll pop in there. It'll
It
pop in there.
will. It will. I want to go back to something in your career that maybe people who are just getting to know you, what have you, aren't as familiar with. Because again, it probably goes back to a strong sense of having a strong sense of community, of closeness with other people who are all sort of trying to do the same thing, and that being in the Air Force and being a
Yeah.
combat photojournalist.
Yeah.
And I read that you were sort of instrumental in bringing digital into using that in the military.
Yeah.
And I mean, so this is like sounds like Patreon.
Oh,
Somebody wrote
Patreon.
me. Somebody wrote in the comments, thank you, William Chang. Patreon is the
Yeah,
tool.
that one.
Uh, that one. That people are your Patreons. Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Going back to that comment, just if anybody out there is looking for a way to, be able to integrate that into their own platforms or whatever, Patreon is a place where you can get people to pay you like $2 a month, $3 a month.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyway, so let me start over again with the military career and
Yeah.
integrating that with photography. And I would love to have people be able to hear sort of your story of that being part of your career.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So the Air Force, aim high is where it all began, or kind of began. So it's a long story, right? I was in there for 8 years, and there's a lot of stuff that we did while I was that I did while I was in there. But what you kind of were touching on was the introduction of digital imaging to the Air Force. So I was assigned to the 1369th Audiovisual Squadron out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, which is a missile base. This is a base where they train missileers. These are people that sit in those missile silos in North Dakota to press the button if somebody tells them to press the button. So that was the main mission of that base, is a Space Command base. And the one of the things that we were doing, I was assigned, like I said, to the audiovisual squadron, and we were doing everything at the time, was traditional photography and, just dip and dunk with chemicals and all that. We had computers back then. This is a long time ago. I'm dating myself. I'm older than I look. So we had computers, but it was on the cusp of moving from, like, for example, digital cameras were still like, it was plausible to say these things will never ever, surpass the quality of film. It was in that era, and it was plausible to say that. It wasn't like, really? Okay. And I remember at the time, Kodak had just released the Kodak DCS 420, which was a Nikon camera, a Nikon N8008 body with a Kodak hard drive grafted to the bottom of it, a spinning hard drive. This is pre-SD, right? So a spinning hard drive. You can imagine with the battery life of this thing. So the camera was around 1-ish megapixels, and it was gigantic. And so anyway, I wrote this proposal to my commander about Photoshop, because this is the beginning of Photoshop. This was like Photoshop 2, I believe, like way back in the era. This pre-layers. They even had layers in Photoshop. This was back when you had to save as and change the name to keep versions of your document so that you could roll back. This was back then. So I wrote this proposal of, we need to fully incorporate Photoshop into our workflow, and this is how we do it. We need these scanners, we need these cameras, we need these workstations, X number of workstations. I did the math, it's going to cost this much. This is a little Airman Johnson back there, right? So I put together the whole proposal with numbers and the whole 9 yards and presented it to my boss, who then presented to his boss, who then presented to the base commander, who then said, yeah, tell me more. And we did it, ultimately we did that. And I revamped the studio. I was stationed in Tokyo for my first assignment at Yokota Air Base in Tokyo. And for the first assignment, one of the things I did was revamp the studio there, because I was, part of our job was studio photography. So part of the week I was a studio photographer taking officer portraits, and there were some things that we needed to do to make that studio more modern based on what was available. So we increased that, or made that better. So that, that kind of stuff. And for the digital imaging sort of revamp of the base, that was I believe the first, we were kind of a test bed for the Air Force in terms of other bases saw it and like, hey, what'd you guys do? Can we do that too? Other audiovisual squadrons. And now everyone was doing it. And I got a commendation medal for it from the Air Force, which is pretty awesome, which is hanging on the wall right over there.
Which is very awesome. And just to how old were you when you were like putting this proposal together? I
want to say I was in my early 20s back then. Yeah. So I was a kid. I was just a kid who just was, and I was geeking out on Photoshop too, because this was around the era when, like I said, everything you had to, in order to be good at Photoshop, you had to be good at channel operations. They called them chops back then. You had to be good at channel operations and understanding how to, get this channel and do this to it so that you could then load it back in and change these colors and, so that level of deep understanding of the software, the fledgling software at that time, kind of set up this foundation for me just sort of loving the power and the possibility of digital imaging and the stuff that you can, basically anything you could dream of, if you can figure out how to build it, you can make it, right? Even back then. So, that kind of pushed the whole digital imaging thirst of me forward, or from me forward. And it's still to this day, the stuff that I do today, even with the podcast and other projects I'm working on, everything is tied together. It all has a backbone of digital imaging and photography in it. Even the podcast, even the community, even the events we're going to start, all this stuff is all on the same background. Or backbone. So it from the surface, it may appear that, wow, Frederick's doing all these things. In reality, it's not, right? In reality, I'm doing this podcast so I can geek out about this camera that I'm using to look great on the screen and these lights that I have up and, all these, the software that you can use to do this stuff. So it all just, it goes back. I'm doing the exact same thing I was doing back in the military, just looking for ways to improve processes to make things better. And I did that at Apple, I did that at Adobe, and I'm doing it now here.
Well, I was going to say, your setup is amazing. That looks much better than mine.
Yeah. It's just the camera. This, for folks that are wondering, people always ask me, hey, what camera are you using? This camera is an old Lumix GH4 with a 12-35 f2.8 lens on it. That's it. That's it. It's plugged in to the computer through a ATEM Mini Pro, but it could just as well be any HDMI interface. And I have two lights, one on either side of the camera shining at me, and then two lights back there with gels on them. That's it. You turn it on, and you're good.
Look at you going into teaching mode. I love it.
Sorry,
I love it.
sorry.
No, don't be. Always teaching. Always. Passing along wonderful, tips and
sharing. It's
just
all about
sharing.
Yeah.
Sharing. I'm just gonna just pause for 1 second and check in with my producer, director Adam, because on my screen, this is the reality of live, everybody. On my screen, you have frozen. So I'm not sure if that is on everybody else's screen as well. Yep.
It's frozen on my side
frozen. Too. Okay.
Oh.
So let me see what Adam recommends that we do. And everybody, for the moment, thank you for bearing with us. Once again, you know how it is, Frederick.
Setup, right?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to see what Adam is going to have us do. We probably are going to pause for a second. And let's see. Let's see. Okay, Frederick, I see your picture went away. If you can turn your camera off.
Crazy.
If you can turn
let me do
the camera off and then back on, that would be great. Thank you. And we will be right back, everybody. I'm not sure if everyone can hear me right now or if we're just on the still. All right, everyone, welcome back. Thank you. That was just a little tech break. It's pretty funny how, again, live streaming, what have you, start to talk about something and it goes on the fritz.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. Because what else? What's the alternative? Right?
That's right. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so we were talking about community. We were talking about just how when you look back in your career, it is easy to see the through lines, but it's not always the case when you're in it. I am curious. You were talking about loving to look at processes and make them better. How much of your time are you tinkering with things? I guess I was, when I go back to thinking about the TWiP and so much testing of gear or talking about gear, like how do you find so much time to be researching and tinkering with the latest and greatest things?
Yeah, it's hard. It's not hard, and that's an interesting question because the stuff that I do, like the podcast and photography and drones and 360 cameras and all this stuff, I don't do it because I have to do it. I do it because I like doing it. Like, it's not like, okay, the day's over, now I can go do this other thing. It's like, oh, the day's over. I'm finished streaming now. I could go fly the drone, or what's this new drone that's out? It's always, my brain is in that world already. And the podcast and the things that I do just kind of serve as an outlet for me to geek out about it with people. So it's not the opposite, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I was at your Twitter, I think it was your Twitter handle that says, or description says, I'm a photographer and creative professional who loves creating unprofessionally. And
Yes.
I so I think that's an interesting conversation and distinction between creating a life that is surrounded by photography and beyond of whatever it is that you're passionate about versus having that be like I always say I don't make my income by like taking pictures and selling them to people, but I've created this life of that everything is surrounded photography related.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so, how much time are you, or is that what you mean by who loves creating, comma, unprofessionally?
Yeah, that was a really intentional statement I put on there. So that comes from, in a lot of ways, my time at Adobe. So at Adobe, one of the key things I learned a ton when I was there, but one of the key things I learned was the definition of amateur, the versus professional, right? And the word amateur, the knee-jerk connotation of the word amateur is this is somebody who's not as good as a professional, when that's not true. The real definition is somebody who does something for the love of doing it, not because they have to do it. Meaning, in many cases, which is what bore itself out when I was at Adobe, amateur work is very often superior to professional work because an amateur can spend days retouching a photo where a professional has to get that thing out because they're losing money and they got to get on to the next one. So the creative professional who loves creating unprofessionally is just that. Like, because I don't make the bulk of my income from photography, I would consider myself an amateur photographer, right? Because I don't go out and say, hey, I am this, even though I say that on my byline, I don't go out there and purport to be this Joe McNally or this type guy that are powerhouses in the photography industry. I watch Joe McNally and Rick Salmon and Scott Kelby and all those guys do their things, and I'm taking feverish notes about what they're doing, just like my community does. So I like creating unprofessionally because that's the amateur side of things in the purest sense of the word, where I do it for the love of doing it, not because I have to do it.
I love that sentiment, and I can remember when I first heard that as well, that amateur means for the love of.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for people to be able to reflect on that, because going into a professional career, becoming Joe McNally or, or what have you, isn't necessarily for everyone. And yet there's
Yeah.
this like, are you professional or not professional?
Hmm.
And so it's this like as if being a professional photographer is better than being an amateur photographer.
Right.
But
Right.
I think it's again going back to like you and I both as being these guides that are sort of again just trying to be there with everybody, holding space, and that's what I really appreciate about the way that you approach what you do.
Yeah.
How has your photography though changed over time? What in the photography aspect of your um, playing unprofessional, what are the sort of some of the fun things that you're excited about right now?
Yeah, yeah. So the genre that, if I had to pick my desert island genre of photography,
I
is
like that.
portraiture. Yeah, if I had to pick one, would be portraiture, fashion, that kind of thing. Because I love taking pictures of people and then, doing the retouch and then presenting them with it. I love that flow of it. But the thing that's most exciting me right now is, and it has been for several years now, is the idea of uh, telling stories. Photojournalism obviously is telling stories through photography, but telling cinematic stories is what I want to start experimenting with in 2021 in a single frame where you're. And this is inspired by Marvel because I'm a big Marvel nerd, right? So, looking at Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they've created this entire universe with all these films that show vignettes into that universe. Like there's a bunch of stuff going on, just like the Star Trek or Star Wars universes. There's all kinds of stuff going on apparently, and we get a little glimpse into little worlds of things that are happening in there. And I was thinking, why can't you do that with photography? Why do photographers? It's rhetorical, right? So why do photographers just take a picture of a flower and then present it on Instagram? Why you take a picture of a pretty girl, present it on Instagram, picture of this, that? Why not tie it together like an anthology or something and tell a story in a single frame? Create your own cinematic universe based on whatever your own ethos or dogma or zeitgeist is right now, right? And build that world with its own physics and gravity and rules and whatever that's happening, put characters in there, and then create stories in a frame to tell that story. And because we are back in the day, back in the days we were just talking about, everything was very much a still frame. There was not very much sharing or anything, and it was, if you're a photographer, you're going to create a print. That was the whole thing. But today you can create a story using multimedia, right? So you can do photography, you can do cinemagraphs, you can add audio to it, you can do written word to add that to it. So why not do it in that kind of vein where you're using all the different pieces that are available to you in service of whatever that particular segment of the story is? So that's kind of the direction I want to move in, where I don't know what the cinematic universe would be called, but there's this universe, and now I'm telling this part of the story. And then the other part of it, this is where the marketing stuff comes in. So the other part of what I want to start experimenting with is why can't photographers call themselves artists and musicians call themselves artists. So why can't photographers start releasing work kind of like musicians release work? Instead of taking photos and saying, boom, here, look at what I did, or whatever. Why not do that cinematic universe type thing and then release the work to big hurrah? Like, hey, there's a new chapter in this story is coming out on Friday. You got to go check it out. I'm going to put it on Instagram. Boom, 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 boom. Right? So now you have a box to work in instead of like, I got all this great gear. Let me go take a picture of some leaves that just fell. Right? Now you have a reason to go out and take pictures because you got to, there's this new segment of the story that you need to shoot. And then maybe if you have writing chops, you can write up the story segment of it and, do a little short story to service that thing, or maybe do some audio to go along with it. So you can have fun with the whole world of media and then deliver it through Instagram or wherever, because you have the tools to do it. So that's kind of the direction I want to move things in.
Wow. If you guys are watching or listening to the audio version of this, my face is just like, tell me more. And my brain is kind of going around like, whoa. Because, well, first, so I don't know if you can share yet, but like, I want to know where does Frederick's mind go? What is your ethos? What is the world that you would be creating? Or
it's a very genre? Utopian world. I'll tell you, I'll give you a hint. So and the hint can be drawn by the kind of movies I like to watch, right? So like I said, Marvel, I'm a big Marvel guy. I like superhero movies. I like science fiction movies. But I like science fiction movies that are kind of utopian future, not dystopian versus, not Mad Max or Walking Dead, more of Star Wars, Star Trek, kind of in that vein. So it would be in that. So what I would want to create, and this is driven by a lot of this is driven by the current events over the last several years or so. But like, kind of the phrase would be, wouldn't it be cool if, right? So kind of like Black Mirror. Right, you look at the Black Mirror series, and they just have this kind of matter-of-fact, nonchalant. Of course, it's like that science fiction integrated into the underlying plot line of each episode. So so kind of looking at it in that direction, like, oh, there's a person doing some ordinary thing, seemingly, but it's extraordinary in some way. But it's matter of fact that it's there, right? It's not It's not like I'm doing this shot to show that I can do levitation, and I'm showing you my Photoshop skills because I can levitate myself over the Golden Gate Bridge. There's got to be a reason around that. Why is Frederick levitating over the Golden Gate Bridge? Oh, it's because he just found out he had superpowers and he doesn't know how to use them yet, right? So something like that.
Okay, I know that it could be like seen as an over-asked question or whatever, and I wouldn't have asked it if we weren't having this conversation. But
Yeah.
what would Frederick's superpower be if you could have one?
Oh man, that's a good question. There's so many. I think if the superpower has to like be bound by the laws of reality and physics, I would be kind of like an Iron Man guy. So,
Okay.
my
Okay.
superpower would be being very smart and obscenely rich, and then doing good things with both of those things. So, kind of not the Batman side of it, the Iron Man side of it. But if it's more in a fantasy type science fiction, then it would be time travel, 100%. I'd be a
Yeah.
time traveler. I'd be changing things all day long. I'd be changing stuff. So,
I mean, it just goes to both of these things we've been talking about for the past few minutes. It's like your brain is able to create outside of just physically creating something.
yeah.
And I mean, even tied to your professional career, or going back to your in the Air Force, like or you talking about trying to figure out systems. Like I can
Yeah.
clearly see how your brain, I don't know, just
You're trying to
works.
say it's
No, I
scattered.
can't.
It's scattered. It's all over the place. I know,
No,
MJ.
no, not scattered, but like the ability. I don't know. I just think it's fascinating, the
Yeah.
ability to create not just at a nuanced scale of I see this flower, it's beautiful. I'm going to focus on the light. I'm going to tell a story about this flower, to this flower is a superhero and it's going to
Hmm.
save the world and levitating across the, just I think it's fascinating,
Yeah.
and
It's so
I'm
much fun.
excited to
There's
see
so much you
what
can
you
do.
create.
Yeah, there's so
Ha-
much you can do. Like looking at it, I was just thinking about this yesterday. It's so timely. I was thinking about this yesterday. I was looking at a lot of compositing work from
yep.
people that I admire, like Renee Robin, and these people that do these just fantastical, ridiculously cool and realistic looking Photoshop composites. And I was thinking, man, I want to see, like, we see things in the real world, or kind of with real world physics in these composites all the time. But wouldn't it be cool if we did? So here's the impetus of this. So I'm looking at these composites, and then the next thing I'm looking at was people were talking about the importance of shallow depth of field in bokeh, and getting lenses that can support blurry backgrounds and all that. So I'm thinking, why not push that forward and do a composite that's in miniature? You've seen those miniature shots that look like a miniature train set or whatever. Why not have a perspective like that, a compressed perspective where everything looks very shallow depth of field, but then overlay fantastical elements into that shallow depth of field scene with blurry things in the foreground and background, sharp things in the middle, and then that would sell the reality of it a little more, because your brain is like, oh, of course it's real. That's out of focus and that's in focus, right? So anyway, that's where my brain goes when I switch to the creativity kind of circuit. It goes to that cinematic universe and building those kinds of things. And then I take those things, those ideas, and I'm thinking from a community standpoint, well, if I'm focusing my creative talents over here and I'm excited about this piece this month, that could be a topic in the community that we talk about. Just not so much that piece, it's not narcissistic, not so much that piece that I'm working on, but the techniques around that and ideas, and maybe even challenge the community to do similar things. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. So it all then like weaves in together. You see how it all kind of it ties together. The community, I'd be talking about it on the podcast, I'd be creating it, building courses around it, the whole 9 yards. So
Yeah, I definitely was just my mind went to, yeah, sounds like a course to me.
yeah, right, yeah.
And I I just love, I mean, how do you decide? Because again, so many ideas. How do you decide what to work on? Like what idea comes past the, I got all these ideas. Now I'm going to try this. I'm going to actually try this one, put it into fruition. Like
Yeah.
what is it that takes you to the next step of ideas to doing, acting upon them?
Well, there's ideas and the pie in the sky stuff, and then there's the work, right? So
Hmm.
the work side of it and the project management side of it comes back down to Apple and Adobe and my experience with product management there, because I'm managing multiple projects at any given time, whether it be the refresh of the website or switching email service provider platforms or testing out a new CRM, all these different things that I'm working on. And the way that I keep it all straight is through, I have this piece of software, you may have heard of it, called Notion, that I use to keep everything kind of like, I know what I need to work on next, I know who I need to call next, I know all this stuff. It's in Notion. And I walk around with one of these guys with me. So then, for the listening audience, that was an iPad. So I walk around with an iPad with a pen so I could take notes, and I can, basically manage the entire business for the most part from an iPad. It's designed that way that if all this lighting and camera and stuff went away, I could still do an entire episode of TWiP and everything just from the iPad. It wouldn't sound as good, but I could do it. I could manage the business. I could see income, outflow. I could see what's next project wise, everything. I could see it all from the iPad, or in a pinch, a phone. So, you know.
I'm actually not familiar with Notion, so definitely
Oh,
going to check that out. No, I don't. I don't use that particular one, but definitely
there goes your
will
week. I'm
check that
telling
out.
you,
I
you will
know.
fall in love with it. Notion, I'm not, and I have no affiliation with them other than being a nerd that uses them. But Notion.so is the URL
Ah,
for them,
okay.
and it is, yeah, it'll change how you think about managing and organizing disparate projects and all kinds of stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
So that leads me to think, like, do you schedule a time for creativity?
No, I don't. I should. I should. That should. But my most creative ideas come when it's either in the shower
Yep.
normally, or if I'm driving. Right. For some reason, when I'm driving, because my brain, I don't know how the psychology of it works, but I'm occupied doing other things and watching traffic, and but that's when I have epiphany moments. Usually is when I'm driving, and which is awesome. So I keep a pad of paper in the car, not the iPad, pad of paper with a pen in the car, so I can scribble down chicken scratch whenever I'm driving, and then I try to execute on those things if they make sense later. I also keep a pad next to the bed, so even though the iPad's in there, I keep a pad of pen and paper next to the bed. So if I have some sort of epiphany while I'm watching TV or doing something else, then I just jot it down real quick. And then, because those ideas are great, and then they go away later. And you're like, what was that thing? It was a great idea. It's gone like a dream, right? So,
Uh, well, I think it's smart to put processes in place for your creativity. Like you said. I also think it's interesting that this concept of or thinking about creating a space where you can have the you can you not reenact but force, I don't know, force probably not, whatever your brain goes into when you are in the shower, when you are driving, when you are, kind of like, what is it that the mind is in this other space where you're doing something, but
yeah.
it's that like recess. I don't know.
It's weird. It's like I have to be doing something else in order to be creative. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go clean out the garage, and while I'm cleaning out the garage, I'm just having, and I'll have headphones on in there, and I'm just doing stuff, and and then I have ideas, and it's like, oh yeah, what if you did this? Oh, you know what? I've like literally solved problems while doing things, just like working it out in my head. Like, why does that camera not? Why does the computer not see that camera? Right? And I'll just work it out. Oh, because you didn't do this. Did you do that? Did you install the drivers? And it'll work it out, and I'll come back and sit at the computer, and execute it and it works. So I don't know. It's weird. People with psychology backgrounds probably understand how that works, but my brain literally can't be dormant. It can't. It can't is a strong word, but I usually have the best ideas and am able to be most mentally productive when part of my brain is busy doing something else. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. No, it's again, I'm just really fascinated by the fact that we can study these things now, the brain studies and all of that as well is it's just an exciting time on that
Yeah,
front
for sure.
as well. Okay, so we've run out of time, but I want to
Ah,
ask this sort of, I know it always goes so fast. Um, Final question for you. Wouldn't it be cool if, fill in the blank?
oh,
I'll
that's a
go back on
loaded
what
question,
you said
kiddo.
earlier. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Yeah. Okay. There's a bunch of different answers. I'll give one answer to that. A non-political answer to that.
Yes,
Wouldn't
please.
it be wouldn't, wouldn't it be cool if the computers and software were at a state now where they were inconsequential, right? So what I mean by that is the speed of the processor, how much RAM you have in your computer, how fast is your phone? You need the faster processor in your phone, and your internet connection is this, and your camera megapixels that, and all that. I want to be in an era. That's the time traveler, Frederick. I want to be in an era where all that stuff is solved. Like maybe it's Apple with their M1 chip or something, but it's all solved. Everything is just ridiculously fast, and you can throw anything you want at it and do whatever you want. So technology is no longer a bottleneck, and figuring stuff out like, oh, I want my audio to sound good on this podcast, so I need to get this, and that needs to run through that, and I got to hook this up. And, I just want it just to be like, maybe I want to be in the future, right? Because I know my kids are going to be like, what? You guys had to use that? We just do it all with holograms now, So I want to be in that world where technology is just, it just doesn't matter, and it gets out of the way to let us do the things that we need to do, which is, commune with each other, communicate, with community, or execute some weird idea we have and just go to town with it and not have to worry about, do I have enough processor speed or hard disk space or internet speed or anything like that. So that's my wouldn't it be cool if.
I love it. Well, and the other piece of that to me is sort of it is the great like equalizing where also that everybody had access to all of that. Therefore, there weren't blockers of this person
Yeah.
has more of this and more of this, and therefore they don't have the ability to, if there is, yeah,
Yep.
utopia.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's you can see it's coming, right? You can see the evolution of tech and speed and, Elon Musk and their Starlink network coming with ubiquitous access everywhere. There's all these things that are coming, but they're not here
Yeah.
yet, right? So,
Yeah. Beautiful.
maybe we'll get it right on Mars when we get there.
We'll get there. Thank you so much, Frederick, for being on the show today. I want to make sure everybody knows how to join, get involved, and follow all the things all the worlds you are creating for all of us.
Absolutely. Yeah, just head over to thisweekinphoto.com. That's the podcast. The community. It's interesting. So the community as it stands right now, I've paused membership, so no one can join right now. The members that are in there, but it will be relaunching in a couple of weeks. So go over to the website, or check back at the website often, and you'll see the whole thing is going to change. And if you're on the TWiP list, you'll get a notification of when it goes live with, the whole 9 yards for launch. You'll get the offer and all that stuff. But it's going to be pretty amazing because I'm trying to build something that's unlike anything else that's out there in terms of the kind and caliber of people that are in the community, as well as the excitement around photography. The way I position it is a good way to close. The way I position it is the TWiP community is a community of photographers that are inspired by, learning from, and encouraging each other. That's basically what it is. So, and with zero tolerance for trolls. So if you're a troll, just, keep going.
Sounds pretty awesome, Frederick. All those links will be in the show notes. And once again, thank you for another fascinating and thought-provoking conversation. So thank you again. And thank you to everybody who tuned in for the live. Of course, you can get all of the previous episodes of We Are Photographers, the podcast, wherever it is that you stream your podcast, listen to podcasts, or right here on Creative Live at creativelive.com/podcast. And we look forward to seeing you next time. We're streaming right now on creativelive.com/TV, which is another awesome place for free content to be able to learn from conversations as well as performances and all kinds of things to entertain, educate, inspire, connect. And so once again, thank you again, Frederick Van Johnson, and we will see you all next time right here on Creative Live.
See ya.
If you're feeling isolated and looking for creative connection, try tuning into creativelive.com/TV. That's where we've got a 24/7 live stream from the kitchen counters.
I can do that backlit shot that I really like to do.
From the studios and living rooms of many of the world's top creators, where we're doing musical performances, Q&As, cooking shows, virtual book tour events, drawing, spoken word poetry, and more.
Life passed me by waiting for an invitation when the world is greater than my nation or my occupation. Be someone you've never been. You feel all that adrenaline, it's medicine.
It actually helps me feel like my days are more purposeful.
I hope that out of this deep pain will come some collective growth.
Dive into Creative Live TV today. Hey guys, what's up? It's Chase Jarvis, founder and CEO of Creative Live. You all know that we have more than 2,000 classes and more than 10,000 hours of learning, inspirational, and motivational content on the platform. I'm super excited to announce a new experience on Creative Live. It's called Fast Class. You've told us that you're busy and sometimes it's hard to dive into a full class from start to finish. So essentially, we're now giving you a shortened highlight version of our top Creative Live classes. You can always dive into the full class with 5, 10, or 15 hours of great content. But now, if you're just looking to focus on a few of the highlights or want to be able to skip quickly to something that really interests you, you can now get a shortened fast class version of that class. We're also thinking this might be able to help you explore a new craft and save time while doing it. This is a great tool to curate your learning experience to help create the life that you seek. So you're probably thinking, great, how do I access this new experience on Creative Live? That's easy. All you have to do is be a subscriber to the Creator Pass, and then all this is yours.